Ladies and gentlemen, this is the state of the scene.
Marcos, let's get into it. Clancy by 21 Pilots.
You make me sad and second guess myself. Could be so cold, Midwest indigo.
This is the Columbus, Ohio outfit's 7th studio album, released the 24th of May via Fueled by Ramen Records. Clancy consists of 13 tracks and is the much anticipated follow-up to 2021's Scaled and Icy LP, titled after Protagonist, that was introduced in their 5th studio album, Trench, which is already 7 years old. It released in 2018, and it serves as the final chapter in this band's near decade-long conceptual series, and it's explicitly called Clancy, so I figured it's probably time to do some lore.
We're doing a lore dump.
We're doing a lore dump. I want to get into who Clancy is, where Clancy is,
Why Clancy is.
Sam, this is a comprehensive, heavy, dirty 21 Pilots lore refresher. Clancy, Sam, is a disillusioned fictional character living inside a circular theocratic city loomed by huge walls. The worst possible thing that could loom a theocratic city, I've always said.
Huge walls.
That city, and I hope to God I'm going to go with the right pronunciation, is called Dima, which draws its name from Dogma, or, in quotations here, Tower of Silence in Zoroastrianism. In that religion, towers of silence were used to dispose of dead bodies by having vultures eat the corpses. That's why there's a vulture on the cover of Trench. Dima, did you know this, Sam, sits in the lower region of the large and wild continent of Trench.
That I did know.
Which is the name of one of their albums, again. In this city, in the city Clancy's from, rather, they follow a religion called Vialism. Vialism is kind of cool because the end goal is to take your own life. This place is ruled by 9 bishops. They're called the Sacred Municipality of Dima. The bishops' names were a combination of lyrics from different songs on their album Blurryface. The most important one really is Nico, who also goes by the name Blurryface. Clancy's been in this bitch 9 years, okay? And Clancy's had it up to here with Vialism. He's tired of these bishops. As a result, he's tried to escape multiple times, but is either stopped or eventually caught by Nico. That's why he's the important one. He's the head king bishop. During one of the escapes, though, Sam, Clancy meets the Banditos, okay? A rebel group that lives in the wilderness of Trench. They live up on the cliff tops. They're pretty integral to the story and kind of take this dude under their wing. We're going to go on to the Scaled and Icy stuff. The Scaled and Icy stuff is going down. It's an album in the lore that is described as propaganda. Clancy left the continent, was used as propaganda by the bishops. Clancy gives a performance on a submarine at some point that's part of this annual assemblage of the glorified thing that's AAG, like this whole like ritual thing. Again, they do it annually, where people die and are used as vessels by the bishops to do like their dirty bidding, I guess. This is where I start to like, my understanding of the universe sort of starts to crash and burn here and there, but we move. We got to move regardless, Sam. Clancy on that submarine is attacked by a strange creature under the water, and at this point him and like this torchbearer guy wash back up at sea, and I think that's where we are here in this Clancy timeline.
Song called Saturday. You said, hey, let's keep that in the back of our mind for when we talk about this album in a little bit.
Yeah. I think at this point, Clancy is back to wanting to destroy the bishops and Dima, and he starts learning psychokinesis, and that's like what the bishops be doing. So like it's bringing a gun to a gunfight. Like we're on their level at this point. Yeah. Clancy's off Trench. He was on Voltzoy, I think, but now he's back on Dima.
Okay, so he's
got a renewed hope in his plan of overthrowing Dima. He's taking back his own identity. He's no longer a pawn for these bishops.
Yeah,
and he's gonna fucking murder Blurryface. That's where this is all leading up to. Okay, and he's gonna kill all these little bitch bishops. They've all had it coming. From what I can gather, Clancy seems to have reunited with the Banditos, who are waiting for him on the other side of the Paladin Stray, which is the name of the closer on this album. There's a new resistance growing inside the walls of Dima, and the revolution is nigh, Sam. The members of the new rebellion against Dima have began to follow Clancy's motion. So it's all sort of coming together Dune Part 2 style at this point. Okay. And I guess what happens on this album is kind of what goes on after this point. So let's talk about it, Sam. That's the best lore dump I could do. Let me know in the comments if I did an awful job or an okay job.
I think the most incredible thing about 21 Pilots and the fact that there is such depth and so much lore is that knowing none of it would not hinder your experience listening to this album in any capacity. The fact that they've figured out a way to have albums that are so deeply steeped in lore, but also separate them in a way that you don't need to know any of it to enjoy it. There is a fine art to that specifically that I think should be appreciated.
Right. The fact that Saturday can be such an integral part to this entire story, and then I hear that song and I'm like, Saturday, like it's just
right. They
banger.
get to almost like live in two separate spaces at once.
Sort of listening to this with plenty of that knowledge in mind already. Not only do I think it improves Trench and Skilled and Icy in my eyes, I think it adds to the listening experience here for sure.
I think another aspect that really improved this album for me personally, and it was a question from one of our patrons. Did you follow the Clancy live stream of the videos at midnight? And if yes, what did you think of it, Marco? So the way it was done is that essentially it was Josh and Tyler and their music video director all sort of discussing the songs and some of the ideas behind them, and then getting into like the music video. Like Tyler said what like his least favorite songs on the album were, which I thought was one of the most hilarious, like crazy things to do in a live stream.
All right. So let's
He'd
flip.
be like, this song was, I didn't even want it on the album, but Josh convinced me. And then he got to another song. He's like, I'll be real with y'all. Josh also wanted this one. It is my least favorite song on the album.
Bro was feeling his drumming on those tracks.
It was crazy to watch someone like frame songs, but there was also a lot of like interesting like context provided behind a lot of the songs and videos and stuff. Okay, so this opens with Overcompensate, Next Semester, and Backslide, which were all singles. The other single that came just this week was the Craving, though it's a singles version. On the album, we get Jenna's version,
and
which
not
is
a single version anywhere.
Right.
Backslide for me, I think ended up being my favorite of the bunch.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Really?
Yeah, because I would say personally, it's my least favorite of the opening three singles that we get on here. I've really come around on a song that I enjoyed the first time I heard it, Overcompensate, to enjoy it somehow even more significantly. And I think it's because it opens the album and it's such an incredible tone setter. For me, Overcompensate runs away with it, but I would follow that up with Next Semester and then Backslide. Why is it that Backslide stands out to you so much?
I don't know. There's just something about like that song to me.
Clearly, the hook is working incredibly well for you.
It is. I think the best hook is on Next Semester, right? Hey, kid, get out of there, like that whole thing.
Right,
like,
but to be difficult, you chose the outlier.
Backslide to me has the overall best feel
Okay.
from beginning to end. But I think they were all very interesting selections as far as singles go. Favorite songs on here? I really like the 1-2 punch of Midwest Indigo and Routines in the Night directly after those singles.
Yes, sir.
I think those are huge. I think Midwest Indigo with like that synthier, sort of darker sound to some degree really
Did it feel like
works
this
for
band
me.
pivoted in a way that was almost really exciting right at the outset here? Where like you
Yes.
didn't expect to get something like Midwest Indigo after these first three singles, and suddenly like your interest feels significantly peaked. I was right there
Exactly.
with you.
And then Routines in the Night
It was
is,
like I didn't have this album pinned in a way that I thought I did.
Routines in the Night for me is a similar argument to Backslide, where it just has a good feel to it. And I can't quite place my finger on exactly what makes that song
It's the style.
work
It's the
for
style
me.
of it all. For me, it's the style. It's sort of like the style of song it is, but not only that, it's the Tyler Joseph of it. Tyler kind of has a lot of different sort of like artistic personalities, and there are certain ones that
A lot of it plays into the lore.
lean towards more than others, right?
Yeah.
Though, all being said, this album overall has sort of done a good job of convincing me that there are aspects of 21 Pilots style that I really do appreciate more than I thought I did when it works as well as it does in this record. Ukulele version of this band, which I think that overall I was probably much more cooled on. Then coming into this record, it feels so much more important to me. It connects significantly more than it ever has in the past, and those types of songs work much better here. But I agree with you. There's something in songs like Routines in the Night, At the Risk of Feeling Dumb, and Snapback that harken back to a specific style of 21 Pilots that was probably the one that I was most in tune with when I first discovered this band, and is why those songs work so well for me on this album.
Vignette,
Yeah.
I think, has got an outstanding chorus.
Vignette for me had one of the more interesting backstories that Tyler Joseph sort of provided on it, where initially I went into that song and I wasn't overly enthusiastic about it. I think on first listen, it was probably my least favorite song on here, to be honest with you. Maybe tied with something like Lavish. And then getting context for what that song was, it's like sort of about drug abuse and stuff like that. And then me sitting and listening to it and seeing how obvious that comes across once I was given just a small modicum of like context.
Right.
And then how that framed it completely differently in my mind. And I appreciated it significantly more.
A track like Vignette made me realize how well a band like 21 Pilots can sell me on a word. I see Vignette and like suddenly I'm like, you know what? Yeah, that does make a great song title. That does make a great like
that's kind of how I felt
anchor
about
to your
Overcompensate as well. It's like, no, it feels untraditional. It doesn't feel like an exciting song title, but then you hear it in the song and you're like, yes, this clicks.
You're never going to get a track called Paladin Straight on another album this year. So like then you get it from 21 Pilots and you're like, yeah, those words do fucking click together. Those are good words. I think lyrically, I've probably never given this band their due credit. Here it's like I'll listen to this album and then I'll actually pay attention to the lyrics and I'm like, oh, there's way more happening here than I was ever giving this band credit for.
I would feel better getting it off my chest right now. I can confidently say this is far and away my favorite and arguably the best 21 Pilots album, period. And I feel that strongly. Everything that I thought this band did well in the past, they do even better here. And everything that I didn't feel connected to, they knock out of the park here in a way that convinces me that every aspect of 21 Pilots that I ever doubted is actually great because of how well it's done on this record. I know it's a bold statement, but it's truthfully how I feel. I've always been a little wishy-washy with 21 Pilots. I like a few songs here and there. There's a few other songs that I don't like. Overall, I end up with an album that I'm kind of 50-50 for.
This eats Skilled and Icy's lunch 365 days of the year. It's really curious going and hearing an album like this one and then remembering how you felt after Skilled and Icy.
My inception into being a fan of 21 Pilots started with Blurryface, right? And I think it's been slightly diminishing returns ever since that. But to be fair, Blurryface is an album that I didn't love so much as there were songs on there that I really loved. And this album for me is a complete turnaround where from start to finish, I think the vast majority of these songs are near perfect. Not to cut Josh out of the conversation here, but there is something about Tyler specifically for me that he comes across as a extremely genuine and real person. Within these songs, there's something about like the way he speaks, like his delivery and the way he writes that is much easier for me to connect with, and probably part of the reason that I've always had affectation for this band, and because Tyler's voice is something that really clicks with me. I really get that in a song like The Craving. I really get that in a song like Oldie Station. There are moments where Tyler's almost just conversational and it's almost just like he's speaking with you.
Exactly.
And I think that's what draws me in, like it's that connection. And I think At the Risk of Feeling Dumb is kind of an incredible companion piece to Oldie Station that's a lot more fun by comparison, but is kind of like telling a similar story.
Paladin Straight, 6-minute closer. How are we feeling?
I loved it.
Really
I
good.
think Overcompensate and Paladin Straight bookended this album incredibly well. You didn't mention it, but Tyler Joseph's least favorite song on this album is Navigating. A song that
I like Navigating a lot.
I'm quite fond of it as well. It's so funny because Josh starts him and he goes, so we're not ever going to be playing Navigating live, huh? And it was such a funny thing to think about because you're almost like witnessing a conversation that would happen behind closed doors.
Right.
And people would always tweet like, oh man, someday I hope Navigating makes the set list, but never understand why it won't.
6th time seeing 21 Pilots. Maybe we'll get Navigating tonight. Do you think this whole journey would have benefited at all from interludes, intros, outros?
Like here's me kind of telling the story during it's just
here's me washing up on shore and coughing up a little bit.
I'm of two minds.
And then being like, is that the fucking Banditos in the distance?
I'm of two
minds.
minds.
It's like, Clancy, nice to have you back. Get on your feet, soldier. Like shit like that.
There's part of me that says yes, on paper, that is the album that I think I want. What I've been given is an album that I really enjoy. Maybe one of my favorites of the year so far. completely caught me off guard how much I love this record. I wish there was a little more. I don't know that I'd completely change the body of work to include it. It's really hard to say, right?
Would you like to see that from the band in the future, assuming they
I don't know, I'm
expand
really curious what this band
narratively
chooses to
on
do in the
something?
future. So like we mentioned earlier, like they kind of end this in a way that's like, oh, well, I wonder if there is a continuation of this story actually. I don't know. I'm kind of down for whatever 21 Pilots does. If the results are similar to this record, would I have liked more of the story? Yes. I still walked away with an album I really enjoyed. So it sounds like I was kind of happy either way with this record. I like the idea of them maybe starting a new story and maybe they approach it in the way that you just laid out and it feels a little bit more ingrained in the album. You know what? One of the things that I really love about 21 Pilots is that in so many ways they feel like a vestige of the past. Like this is the type of alternative music that I used to really love. This is the type of indie rock bands that I used to really love. This is the type of hip hop that I used to really love. This is the type of emo music that I used to really love. I feel like in a lot of ways, none of these styles of music really exist anymore, except where they all live in one single band who is massive. They scratch so many itches that so many other bands don't get to that I used to have, and they solely are scratching all of them, which is so fascinating. Marcus, can I get your final thoughts on Clancy by 21 Pilots?
Also my favorite 21 Pilots album.
Okay, that's good to hear. Obviously, I reciprocate that, but then I double down even harder and say that I think this is one of my favorite albums of the year so far. It made me really excited about a band that I had always enjoyed but never quite adored, and it framed them in my mind in a completely different perspective. It's crazy to me that on their 7th album, 21 Pilots has now really solidified my adoration for them. This album felt effortless to me in terms of a listener. I just really enjoyed it. Like I just really found myself having a good time listening to it. Even the sadder, more ballady songs that are found on here, just across the board, there were so many moments on this album where I just kind of found myself loosening up and kind of like dancing from like spot to spot as I was doing things around the house. This album brought like a happiness to me that I really appreciate it for, and I think that's one of the reasons why I just ended up loving it so much.